I hate line art, but I'm going to show you how to do it. So let me preface with a little story. One time in the year 2012, there was a little kid who watched YouTube art tutorials and saw these things called microns. I thought that these things were going to make my line art awesome. It was going to take it to the next level. It was going to make my art good. I had never actually done line art before. So I order them on the internet, wait the painstaking 5 days because I'm very patient. And when I finally got the microns, I realized I had nothing to line art. So I busted out the paper. I started sketching as fast as I could so I would have something to line art. And then I busted out these bad boys. I got a variety of sizes. I got a 0.1, a 0.3, a 0.5, a 0.8, and a 0.005. And I thought to myself, magic is about to happen. And it was shit. The line art was so shit. It actually ruined the drawing. And it was in that moment that I realized, hey, art supplies don't actually make you better. The fundamental principle that I was missing was how to make line art effective. So the reason I'm sharing this story is because it has been a whopping 11 years since that time, and I've learned just a little bit more about line art. So I wanted to share some of that information with you in the hopes that it will make you better at your line art. So now I'm going to teach you the fundamentals of line art. We'll call these the line-damentals. Get yourself one of these, or one of these. And if you rolled a persuasion 1 and you actually failed to convince your parents, you can stick with one of these. Once you get one of these, you're going to need one of these drawing softwares. It doesn't really matter which one you use, but I'm going to be using Clip Studio Paint in this example because there are a couple of cool things that I want to show you. So this right here is the G pen. That's going to be our best friend. That's going to be the thing that we're using to line art. And the reason you wanted a tablet is for line thickness. So if you press really lightly, the lines are thin. And if you press really heavily, then the lines get thicker, which is nice because it gives you some variety, which will actually make it a lot nicer when you line art. The other thing over here is going to be stabilization. What this means is that say your hand is super wobbly like this and you try to make a straight line and it's messed up. Clip Studio Paint uses the power of math and decides to even out the edges and give you more stable lines. The higher you turn that up, the more math it's going to use to put your lines and make them more even. So if you have it set to nothing at all, your lines will be pretty one-to-one. And if you set it all the way, there might be a little bit of delay on your system, but Clip Studio will do its best to try to take whatever lines you try to draw and convert them into English. I usually set that in the middle, and with any drawing software, you kind of want to set it high enough that it helps, but low enough that it's not actually killing the life in your lines. And the last thing is a draft layer. You might be wondering what this is, and I will show you how it's useful later, but pretty much what that means is if you set a layer to a draft layer, it makes it invisible to Clip Studio Paint, but visible to you. So if you wanted to add some kind of line thickness or variation here, let's say I want to shade this in and I want to draw here or something like that. If I go to my fill layer and refer other layers, I can actually just fill in the heavy black of a line and say I want to draw this here, and it will help while completely ignoring the blue sketch. Because if I tried filling this in without that draft layer on, you're going to see that it tries to fill in including my sketch. The way that this is important or it's useful is if you're actually trying to shade heavy black areas or things that are very specific for draftsmanship, as shown in an example here. I have the shading for the character all figured out and I want to go in with heavy black lines. So I want my sketch to be visible so I can outline all of those, but I don't want Clip Studio Paint to be getting in the way and trying to fill that in. So that is how draft layers are useful. That's usually why I use Clip Studio Paint for line art, because it's overall just kind of nice. Did you know that you can actually use your line art to suggest a light source before you even have any coloring in it? You see here I have 3 spheres. The only thing I changed about them, which is very subtle, is that they have a heavier edge on one side while this one is neutral. So you'll see this one, because it has lines that are a little bit thicker in this corner, it kind of gives the illusion that there's a light source over here. And then same thing for the right. And this one in the middle, which is none, that line art is perfectly uniform, so that doesn't really indicate a light source. So it's something very subtle, but it's good to know about, because if you actually want to give that little bit of extra oomph to your drawing before you even get into the coloring, or if the image is in black and white, it's going to help you do that. So you can actually use the line thickness to establish a light source, even if it's black and white. the width of the line will actually be able to contribute to the drawing overall. So as an example, I actually stole this drawing from my friend. Her name is Sue. I'll link all of her stuff in the description. But this drawing of hers, you can see the line art is actually very thin. It is very airy. You can tell that if this drawing was done traditionally, she would probably be inking with a single strand of hair. But the illusion that this drawing can give off is like a very calm, very peaceful, very serene, tranquil type of line art, because it's not aggressive and it's very thin and very airy. It helps give a sense of peace along with the color palette for this drawing. So you see her deliberate use of line art here actually makes for something that is very calm, very relaxing. So if that's the type of vibe that you're trying to go for, you usually want to go with thinner lines. And that's not just me making stuff up. Usually in shoujo manga and stuff like that, you'll see they're very thin, very wispy, very airy lines. There are exceptions, of course, but then for shonen stuff, usually things that is a lot more aggressive and action oriented and stuff like that, you'll see, oh, there are those big clunky heavy lines is because they're aggressive. They show movement, you know, it gives like weight to the picture itself. It's actually used a lot in comics. This one here is an example in Ultimate Spider-Man. Here's an example like in Ultimate Spider-Man ripped from a comic itself. You see the heavier and thicker that the line art gets, it just makes it seem like more aggressive and more bulky, and it is deliberate. So if you want to go one route, which is very thin and airy and that fits your style, thin line art might actually be the way to go. The other route, if you want to go with something more aggressive, action oriented and dynamic, you can go with something like this. So yeah, you can actually use the size of the line art to actually contribute to your piece overall. Again, these are more subtle things, but it is something that will help you a lot, especially if you're doing it deliberately, if you're planning it. You can actually use texture to convey a certain mood or feeling in your piece. So if you've ever seen anime before, you can probably see the very smooth digital lines that come along with something like that. And it is very even, very uniform. And, you know, if you wanted to make your drawings look like an anime screenshot, you could just use these heavily anti-aliased lines or add a little bit of a blur to them. Then bam, you get that anime filter. You can also use extremely grainy texture to your advantage when you want your scene to have an impact. Like this, for example, in Dragon Ball, this is the death of a character, Piccolo, so they wanted it to feel gritty, they wanted it to feel like the manga, so you can see that they actually went deliberately with a very strokey, very heavy, grainy type of brushstroke to make this feel like it has weight, like it has grit to it. And this is 100% the exact opposite. This is a scene where they try to do a callback to the original, but you see the lines are very flat, lacking texture, and is overall underwhelming by every sense compared to the original. It can also be used in horror or anytime you want there to be grit. The actual texture of the line art can actually drastically increase the feel of the scene itself. So yeah, that's my recap of all the line art knowledge I have. I hope that you learned something from it and learn to use line art more deliberately, because I didn't want to make this necessarily a technique tutorial, more of a theoretical tutorial instead of a this type of line bad, this type of line good. So yeah, hopefully you learned something from that. Hopefully you liked the video and you learned something from it. But yeah, that's it. Bye. Also, my commissions are open. It wasn't a joke. I actually do hate line art. I usually make painterly stuff like this, but if you're interested, the link to that is also in the description. Okay, bye.